the theme being self-love. I've selected, it's called a metta prayer. Metta means loving kindness, and it starts with ourselves and moves outside of ourselves. So if you could, please close your eyes, take a couple breaths, center yourself, and I'll read these words. My heart fills with loving kindness. I love myself. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be peaceful. May I be free. May all those at UUFLB, young and old, be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. And may they be free. May all my friends be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. May they be free. May all my enemies be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. And may they be free. May all beings on planet Earth be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. And may they be free. May all beings in the universe be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. And may they be free. If I have hurt anyone, knowingly or unknowingly in thought, word, or deed, I ask for their forgiveness. If anyone has hurt me, knowingly or unknowingly in thought, word, or deed, I extend my forgiveness. May all beings everywhere, whether near or far, whether known to me or unknown, be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. And may they be free.
One, two. Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you. It'll guide you when you're down and they're counting. When your secrets all found out, when your troubles take to mounting, when the map you have leads you to doubt, when there's no compass turns to nowhere you know well. Here's a chorus if you'd like to sing along. Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you. It'll guide you well. When the doctors fail to no medicine chest can make you well. When no counsel leads to comfort. When there are no more lies that they can tell. No more useless information. The compass spins between heaven and hell. Let your soul be your pilot. Let Let your soul guide you. It'll guide you well. Your eyes turn towards the window pane, to the light upon the hill. The distance seems so strange to you now. The dark room seems so still. Let your pain be my sorrow. Let your tears be my tears too. Let your courage be my motto. That the north you find will be true. When there's no information and the compass turns to nowhere you know well, let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you. It'll guide you well. Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you. Let your soul guide you. Let your soul guide you. It'll guide you well.
In high school, we didn't really read the classic myths. So this is all kind of new to me about Narcissus. Narcissism takes its name from the story of Narcissus and Echo. In the culture of narcissism, the problem is not that we love ourselves too well, but that we do not love ourselves enough. It is this profound absence of self-love that keeps us from experiencing and generating other kinds of love. Such spiritual poverty will ultimately destroy us, as it did Narcissus. The earliest source for the myth comes from a Homeric hymn dated from the 5th or 6th century BCE, and there is a more contemporary version contained in the Metamorphoses by the poet Ovid. All of the stories contained in his work share the theme of transformation. We know the story of Narcissus in summary: loving only the image of ourselves, we die. This summary, however, conceals more of the story than it reveals. The myth of Narcissus is more subtle and illuminating than imagined, and at the same time, it is incomplete, contradictory, and mysterious. Yielding some answers, it leaves other questions unanswered. So the story of the birth of Narcissus opens with the prophecy of Tiresias. He was a judge condemned to eternal blindness by Juno. These guys were they didn't like each other. The sky goddess, because he agreed with Jupiter that women derived more pleasure from love than men. By the way of compensation, Jupiter gave him the power to know the future. When asked if Narcissus would live to a ripe old age, Tiresias answered, yes, if he does not come to know himself. How strange a prophecy. He will only live a long life if the unsubstantial, dreamlike, watery identity persists, obscuring his true self. The enemy is not self-love, but self-knowledge. The obvious external reality of Narcissus was his surpassing beauty. It probably should be unsurpassing beauty. It caused many to fall in love with him, but his unyielding pride stood in the way of any relationship. This pride made it impossible for him to return love, impossible for him to love others, or even himself. As the story unfolds, Narcissus was pursued by the nymph Echo, who fell helplessly and hopelessly in love with him. Echo also knew the wrath of Juno. Her ability to speak was mesmerizing. It was this ability that Juno altered her forever. Rather than initiating conversation and speaking her own words, she was condemned to speak by repeating the last few words of any phrase spoken by someone else, thus echo. Because of this, she was incapable of having an authentic relationship. Her only conversation with Narcissus was mocked by her echo of his words. She embraced him only to be rejected. Thus scorned, she withered away until only her voice remained. The wrath of the gods was invoked by another scorned admirer of Narcissus who prayed, "May he himself fall in love with another as we have done with him. May he too be unable to gain his loved one." And this wish was granted by Nemesis, there's a name, the goddess of revenge. Yet Nemesis was not one to punish self-love, but rather hubris or pride. Narcissus came upon an ancient still pool surrounded by a cool, dark grove of trees. Stopping to drink, he saw a marble-like image in the water that was smooth, cool, and inviting. As Ovid said, he fell in love with an insubstantial hope, mistaking a mere shadow for a real body. Initially, Narcissus did not even realize he had fallen in love with an image of himself, with his watery reality. All he knew was that a little water, the thinnest membrane, kept him from the object of his love. Kissing or touching the water dispersed the image. As he continued to gaze on the image in the pool, he began to understand that it was his own reflection. And this realization marked the emergence of self-knowledge in Narcissus. In referring to the object of his love, he said, "What I desire, I have." Neither able to have the object of his desire nor to free himself from gazing at his reflection in the water, he now understood the reality of self-love and its limits. As he approached death, he said, "But I wish that the object of my love might outlive me. As it is, both of us will perish together when this one life is destroyed." And his last words were, "Woe is me, for the boy I loved in vain." He recognized that self-love is necessary, but not sufficient. Narcissus died to the self-knowledge foretold by the seer Tiresias. But he was also transformed by love. The unyielding pride was gone. In its place was an understanding and wisdom that had previously eluded him. In death, he was mourned by wood nymphs and water nymphs alike. Even Echo, despite her anger, grieved at his passing. And like Echo, Narcissus achieved immortality, not in an echo that softly repeats a few words, but in a flower. With death, his body was transformed into a flower with a circle of white petals around a yellow center. As Thomas More observes, here we see the hard, rigid, stone-like narcissism transformed into the soft, flexible features of a daffodil, the narcissus. The story begins with rigid self-containment and ends with the flowering of a personality. I offer this alternative reading of the Myth of Narcissus to emphasize the importance of self-love and to suggest that the problem with narcissism arises from the absence of self-love. Until Narcissus loved himself, he was incapable of love.
May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be
Many would take the story of Narcissus as being a story of self-love gone a little bit overboard. But the Greeks always had a bigger story to tell about by these myths. And the prophecy of Tiresias told a long life as long as he did not come to know himself. The enemy here is not self-love, but self-knowledge. I tend to agree with the Greeks on this one, or I disagree with the Greeks on this one, or maybe we have a different definition of self-knowledge. Did Ovid think that self-knowledge would create so much angst that a person could not live long? What's so bad about self-knowledge? Ovid was probably talking about Narcissus' knowledge of loving another and yet not being able to obtain that love back. So even though it was a reflection he was in love with, there was this knowledge that he loved more than himself. Another view of self-knowledge is a self-reflection we take that shows our limitations, that our true selves are sometimes not such likable people. The Greeks were obsessed with the tragic lives and the tragic decisions people made, humans. And they made some pretty great plays about this human condition. If they were around today, they would be the Steven Spielbergs or the Francis Ford Coppolas of their time, and they probably were, because tragedy sells. But now I offer this reading by the Reverend Melissa Zeimer-Carville as we reflect on self-love. She writes, I used to think that if I could just work hard enough, then I would be good. If I were good, then I would be loved. Now I think that part of what it means to be human is that we will be broken. How can it be otherwise? The clinical psychologist and Buddhist lay priest Tara Brach reminds us of this in her book, Radical Acceptance. Imperfection is not our personal problem. It is a natural part of existing. It sounds so easy and obvious to say, doesn't it? Imperfection is a natural part of existing. But I think that most of us, or at least sometimes, tempted to view our imperfections as personal failings. And I think a lot of us are inclined to try, one way or another, to throw those parts of ourselves away. How shall we respond to our messy, lovely, breathtaking, and broken selves? How do we resist the temptation to shut down and seal away the parts of ourselves and our experiences we'd really rather do without? There is a wisdom in one of Christianity's great ethical teachings, love your neighbor as yourself. This line is generally pulled out to remind us to be good to each other. Sometimes, though, I think it is even more challenging to be good to ourselves. Love yourself with all your sharp edges and your constant imperfections. Love yourself when you feel disappointed or frustrated by your own heart and mind. Love yourself when you feel inadequate. Love yourself when you have been wounded by another and left with anger, fear, sadness. Love yourself when you are the one who has caused the hurt, when the needles of guilt and shame prick your conscience. Love yourself. Buddhist practice teaches that one of the ways we love ourselves is by opening our hearts to our experiences. The way out of the cage, writes Tara Brach, begins with accepting absolutely everything about ourselves and our lives by embracing with wakefulness and care our moment-to-moment experience. Acceptance, she notes, does not mean resigning or self-indulgence. It does not condone harm. Rather, it means keeping our hearts open to all our feelings so we can see clearly and have compassion for all our experiences. The very nature of our awareness is to know what is happening. She writes, the very nature of our heart is to care. We don't want to suffer or cause suffering. I once asked my teacher, a wise, compassionate, insightful woman, this is still the other person's, this is not my sayings, how she got to be that way. Oh, she said with a smile, I've learned to not throw anything away. That is what the poets teach, too. The nights of anguish can be our most profound teachers if we would embrace their lessons. How we squander our hours of pain, writes the poet Rilke. Let us kneel more deeply to accept them. Rumi counsels not only acceptance, but also welcome. No matter how dreadful and painful our experiences, even if there's a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. Though you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come, you are still welcome. Open your heart. Love yourself, even when it hurts. You will fall short over and over. And when you do, you can forgive yourself again and try to make it right. Reach out and share your experience, especially when you feel most dejected and alone. Others can help us tolerate the things we're not sure we can bear, can help save us from the building walls around our hearts. Remember that life is good and beautiful, that your birth was a gift. Remember that promise that always comes from the morning light. Practice saying yes to all that life brings, and practice love. I would add that self-reflection is absolutely necessary to make use of our faults. Meditate on this very subject. Understand that we need not repeat the fault countless times in our memory or in the future, but to learn about the underlying condition that makes one choose such actions. That takes time, but it can be a valuable experience. Sarah Movius Schur talks about 6 types of love that, again, our Greek friends pondered about. We are all a mix of every type of these loves. How we balance each one is the tricky part. We know about eros and agape, but there's others, and the one I'm focusing on is one of self-love. This type of love the Greeks called philatia, or the way you love yourself. This kind of love needs to be balanced as well. There's self-love that is positive self-esteem and a happy self-confidence. That's good. We need to love ourselves and treat ourselves as valuable people, because doing so helps us take good care of ourselves and provides a base from which we can love others. Then there's the arrogant and narcissistic self-love that can be destructive. It can overshadow the compassionate agape love and keep a person focused on themselves alone, and that's not good. In the movie by the same name, Forrest Gump says, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." Is that true of love as well, that you never know what you're going to get? Melanie Greenberg in Psychology Today writes this article on the mindful self-express, where she writes about self-compassion rather than self-love. And she says, self-compassion is a way of relating to yourself that does not involve harshly judging or punishing yourself or every mistake you make, or every time someone does better than you. Research on self-compassion shows that it is associated with less anxiety and depression, more optimism, better recovery from stress, and better adherence to healthy behavior changes, such as exercise or diet. Kristen Neff, the pioneer of self-compassion research, described it as follows. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness, concern, and support you'd show to a good friend. When faced with difficult life struggles or confronting personal mistakes, failures, and inadequacies, self-compassion responds with kindness rather than harsh self-judgment, recognizing that imperfection is part of the shared human experience. Self-compassion has 3 separate but related aspects. There's mindfulness, having an open, curious, non-judging attitude, not over-identifying with negative stories about the self. In Buddhist terms, we call this equanimity. Then there's self-kindness, which he defines as treating yourself kindly rather than harshly, extending the same care and support to yourself that you would to a good friend or loved one. Last is the notion of common humanity, allowing yourself to be human, to make mistakes, and learn from them. Knowing that as humans, we are not perfect. Nor should we be expected to act flawlessly. She continues, in my clinical practice, I teach self-compassion to all my clients, and I'm always impressed on how much it can transform their relationship with themselves and promote healthier ways of living. Self-compassion is much more effective in changing behavior than trying to motivate yourself with shame and self-criticism. Shame and self-criticism leads to inner rebellion and giving up, while self-compassion gives you hope and helps you trust the process of change. To become more compassionate yourself, try these following 7 steps. 1. Recognize that you are experiencing emotional distress or mental suffering. Adopt a mindful attitude in which you deliberately pay attention to your inner experience, that you can notice when you are beginning to shift into a negative state. The minute you realize that you are thinking negative thoughts about yourself or feeling anxiety in your body, stop and say to yourself, "This is a difficult moment," or "I'm feeling distress in my mind and body." Here, I personally would suggest meditation as a means of truly learning more about yourself by concentrating on your feelings. Accept the feeling is there. Make a conscious decision to sit with whatever negative feeling is there and try to accept it, because it's there anyway, rather than trying to push it away. If it's a negative thought, look for the underlying emotion, such as anxiety, sadness, or anger, or scan your body to see where you feel tension or discomfort. You may feel it in your chest or your shoulders. Again, meditation can be helpful. And that was number 2. Number 3, imagine what you might feel if you saw a loved one experience this feeling. In your mind's eye, imagine your loved one being scared or sad or feeling bad about themselves. Then think about what you might feel. Perhaps you would feel the urge to help or comfort them. Try to direct this compassionate mindset towards yourself. 4, challenge your negative story about yourself. If you can't feel compassion for yourself because you're feeling undeserving or bad, try to think about this as an old story. Notice the old story of why you are bad. Now find a way to challenge that interpretation. If you acted in an unhealthy or irresponsible way, ask yourself if there were circumstances that influenced that behavior. Perhaps you experienced past trauma or you were caught in a stressful situation. Now make a commitment to try to learn from that experience rather than beat yourself up over it. 5, think about how everybody messes up sometimes. It's tempting to think that you are uniquely messed up, while everybody else is a paragon of virtue. In fact, even the most successful people make serious mistakes. Think about all the mistakes politicians make. I'll just move on. But making a mistake doesn't undo all your accomplishments and successes. Decide what it would take to forgive yourself. If your behavior hurts you or another person, ask yourself what it would take to forgive yourself. Think about whether you want to apologize and make amends to the person you hurt. If you hurt yourself through addictive behavior, avoidance, ruining relationships, or otherwise behaving unwisely, make a coping plan for the next time you're in a similar situation so that you can begin to act differently. 7, use self-talk to encourage yourself. You may say sometimes something like, "It doesn't help to beat yourself up," or "Everybody makes mistakes sometimes." You may want to acknowledge yourself for trying, even if you weren't successful. 8, be a life coach to yourself. Rather than punishing yourself with negative thoughts, gently guide yourself in a positive direction. You may ask yourself what led to the destructive behavior, whether it's really what you want to be doing, or what the consequences are. Tell yourself that you have other choices, and it's never too late to change. I would also add personally to seek help through life coaches, join a support group, or other works on self-love or self-compassion. They may be helpful resources, and others may exist as well. These are all great ideas to help with embracing and accepting who you are. But if it was so easy to do, why wouldn't you already have learned from these lessons and made the necessary changes? Well, the ego is one cagey character that I've learned, and the ego's friend is fear. And fear will try to stop you from changing, as that will affect the ego. Self-reflection is needed, and we tend not to want to spend the time figuring these things out. We like to just play it over and over and over again. Fear has stopped me many times, but I intend to fight this fear. I'm making a commitment to devote more time to this and to my general understanding of myself through intense Buddhist practices. Believe me, there's lots to work on. In doing so, I realize that I need to take a sabbatical from certain activities so I can concentrate on these practices. So I'll be relinquishing my role as worship team leader at the end of this church year to do so. We've got capable people who will take over to manage the needs of making each Sunday special. Along with our team of Mike Lee, Gil Christenberry, Bill Edwards, Amy Rodia, Colleen Stow, and others, Sherry Christenberry is going to help out with some speaker coordination. And we have Avi to enrich our services with music, and I've asked Scott to help as well, so that every Sunday we have excellent musical programs to go with our services. It's always good to have some change, right? Maybe this old dog can learn a trick or two.